Learn the most advanced recruiting techniques. Land the most desirable talent. Launch your company towards massive success. This is the Higher Power Radio Show with Rick Girard.
All right. People will only do something when it's in their own best interest and aligns with our values. This is a key takeaway for me from the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There by Marshall Goldsmith. Now, we talk a lot about aligning with values when hiring on this show, and almost everyone recognizes the importance, but it is often missed. Still, why? First, the disdain that most of us have or we share for hiring. Very few entrepreneurs that I meet enjoy the process of interviewing or hiring, but it is the single most important activity that you can get good at that will make the biggest impact in your organization. Second, the path of least resistance is easy, and we all take it, but it's almost always the wrong path. We must remember that the purpose of the interview is to get to the truth about the person, no matter the source. And the truth you need to know is not in the skills, but in the positioning and value alignment of the individual. I'm Rick Girard, and welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show. We help entrepreneurs and executives win the strongest hires. We do so by sharing insights from top performing rebel entrepreneurs, game changers, and industry leaders like our guest today, Mr. Bruce Watanabe. He's the co-founder and CEO of PowerBuy. Now, Bruce is a serial entrepreneur whom has co-founded a number of technology and internet ventures, including PowerBuy, MassGenie, Sire Mobile, and Seta International. With over 20 years of leadership experience ranging from startups to Fortune 10 companies, Bruce is proficient in corporate strategy, business development, sales, and channel development. He's actively building PowerSet from the ashes of a pivot and is here to share his wisdom with us today, which is what makes Bruce the perfect expert for today's topic. Bruce, welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show today.
Thank you for having me, Rick. Looking forward to it.
It's great to have you. I know you're feeling a little under the weather like most of us as well, but you just got back from Hawaii.
I did. Can't complain.
All right. So we're going to talk about why it's important to prioritize the one thing that you hate most, the interviewing process. And then we're going to talk about how to balance it with all the other numerous things that you have to do, especially when you're trying to do a fundraise, and making it easier on yourself to get that fundraise. Sound like a plan?
Yep. Sounds like a plan.
All right. Perfect. So share with me, if you could, Bruce, a little bit about, some of the challenges that you've kind of found in this environment where, you're rebuilding a startup now and you're doing a fundraise.
Yeah. So one of the things with any startups is you're kind of balancing between launching a product, generating the sales and revenue and metrics that you need while fundraising. They go both hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't have the revenue or metrics, then you're not going to close any funding round, whether it's a seed round, Series A, Series B, etc. So at the end of the day, the common denominator is the people, because if you don't have the right people on your team that can complement your weaknesses or that can complement what you need to accomplish to close a series, to close any funding round, you're not going to be able to do it. So as a CEO of the company, I'm always out there speaking with investors, speaking with venture capital people to basically fundraise so that I can continue to fuel my company. But at the same time, I need a team in place to generate the metrics, the sales and revenue that the VCs require so that I can basically close out the funding round. So it's always a balancing act between, fundraising, generating metrics, and it all revolves around having the right people in place to help you accomplish that.
God, it's funny that you say that, because last week I saw a post that somebody put up. I forgot where it was. It was on one of the social media platforms, but essentially they were talking about how they were able to raise $100,000 with a 10-minute phone call without having any product or any traction, right? But as you got deeper into the article, it was an established team of 4 people that have worked together before, and they've been able to, they've had a success prior, right?
Yeah, there's always something behind the scenes. Like, I think I mentioned this to you, Rick. Like Airbnb, they pivoted 8 times before they even went public. So every startup, they always have their battle wounds, and then not everything is is what it seems to be from the outside. There's always pivots, pros and cons, etc., going through a startup.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the challenge of building a team, because you're building remotely, right?
Yes.
And you're building globally at the same time.
Correct.
So, and you're raising funding. So let's talk about some of those challenges that you're having just on the remote side of things.
So right now, my company is headquartered in Irvine, California, but I've got operations in a number of Asian countries. One is in Vietnam, one is in the Philippines, and we just expanded into Singapore and Indonesia. And with every single country has different sets of cultural differences, expectations, etc. Fortunately, my Vietnam and the Philippines office reports up into my CTO, who is based here in Southern California. And one of the key differences between the US office and our Asian operations is a lot of my employees overseas are much younger. They're probably in their mid-20s. They're very energetic. They're very committed, but they need adult supervision. So because of that gap, my CTO, my co-founder, is able to fill in that gaps, and they take instruction from there. Right now, we just recently expanded into Singapore and Indonesia. Same. I have a bunch of young employees over there, very energetic. And we found a ex-IBMer that used to run sales for Asia Pacific for one of the IBM brands. So we brought him in, fortunately. He just got hired on January 3rd. His name is Michael Walber, and he'll be there to fill in the gaps in terms of the adult supervision per se.
Got it. All right. So you've got people, you have boots on the ground in those various locations, but you're still managing people remote, right? You're not going to actually have people that are going to an office.
No, it's all remote. Pre-COVID, we had an office in all the countries, including the US. But now everyone's working remotely because of the whole COVID situation.
Sure.
So everything's managed remotely.
Yeah, it's funny because my office building where I've continued to go into an office. I have my own private office. It's been really nice, but there's been they're probably sitting at 30% capacity. I mean,
it's great to be in tech, right? Because at the end of the day, we can all work remotely, and most of my employees in Asia are basically engineering and software development. So as long as they can continue to be in front of a computer and write code for us, that's all that matters to us at HQ.
Most definitely. All right, so let's talk about that team. You've got yourself, you have a co-founder, and then you've got two other kind of leaders that are okay. So how are you able to identify those leaders as being the people that best align with your organization and be able to bring them into the fold?
So they all came through referrals, both the head of Asia Pac and the head of US. And for me, it's interview is very dreadful for me. I'm not very good at it. Even though I tried in the past, I hired the wrong people because I'm pretty sure I'm not really good at interviewing. So a lot of the people that came to us that helped fill in the gaps for my organization came through referrals. And for me, throughout my entire career and my entrepreneurship journey, I basically relied on referrals because of the fact that the people that refer the employees to me have vouched for them and have a previous experience doing business or working with them in the past.
So it's really great though that you're willing to admit that you hate interviewing.
I don't think I'm really good at it, to be honest with you.
Well, you know what? If you think about it, it's one of the least taught things. I mean, you don't go to college; they never teach you how to interview. They teach you how to. You can get resources on how to go to an interview, and potentially do okay with the traditional kind of interview process. But nobody teaches you how to set up an interview process or run it, or even what to look for. It's just a little bit. I've talked to numerous CEOs where it comes down to, well, we make the decision based on whether or not we want to have a beer with the person at the end of the day, which, is all well and good, but it doesn't really make that person, it doesn't give you any certainty that person's going to be a good hire for you.
Yeah, and you can't base it on a 1 hour meeting with
No.
a new individual. And for me, as an entrepreneur and a CEO, I literally base my decisions on my intuition. So if I have 1 hour with a person, I'm basically basing my decision on my intuition.
Yeah.
Like all my other decisions in my company. A lot of times, sometimes my intuition is incorrect, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be filling your gut up with the right information, right? And
Right.
there's a lot of stats out there that say that your first you've already made a decision within the first 5 to 10 minutes. The rest of the interview is just you looking for confirmation as to whether or not that decision is the correct one.
Correct. And a lot of times I basically make decisions not just on intuition alone, but if I can get along with the person. But just because my intuition says hire the person, just because that I can get along with that person doesn't mean that they're going to fill in the gaps that I need in my organization, right? So a lot of times it can go against me.
Yeah, it doesn't
And
mean
it
that's
has
what
gone
your business
against me in the
is.
past.
Yeah, yeah. All right, you're listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. I'm your host, Rick Girard. And for our podcast listeners, we're going to take a quick educational moment from our sponsors. Hey, check out stridesearch.com. There you'll find a link to order Healing Career Wounds. Let it be your guide to landing the strongest talent for your companies. Our guest today is Bruce Watanabe, and he's the CEO and co-founder of PowerBuy. And we're talking about kind of balancing those first hires, getting the right people on the bus so that when it gets to that capital raise, it's easy for those investors to write that check, right?
Correct.
So, all right. So we just talked a little bit about some of the challenges you had. And by the way, you brought up some great points, and thank you for sharing those. I mean, not a lot of, I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are out there that are willing to admit that they hate interviewing, but nobody really admits they're not good at it, or they they don't want to be good at it, right? So, but I think it's the most important thing that if we can prioritize getting good at interviewing, because interview is what takes you through to the hire. If you prioritize getting good at interviewing, man, just think of the people you can pull in.
Yeah, because for any startup, yeah, if you have a great product is a major asset for any startup, right? But at the end of the day, it's the people. For me, the most important asset for any startup, including my own, is the people around me and the people that work in the company. And they're the ones that are going to help you drive the business and move the company forward. So people, in my opinion, is the number one asset.
Yeah.
In any startup or any enterprise.
So, taking that down. So if we prioritize getting good at interviewing, that means, I don't know if you're values driven in your organization, but I'm a huge proponent of being values driven. The way in which you lead the company through your values, that's how you make decisions. It makes it that much easier to get people that align with the organization.
Correct.
And, there's only 3 things you really need to put in place. Like understanding your values and making sure that everybody else understands them, having a process, and then being able to gain evidence to support whether or not you're making the right decision.
And sometimes people forget, or I forget, that people are the number one asset in my company because of the fact that I'm so busy raising financing, meeting investors, meeting venture capital, traveling, different places to attract new capital to continue to fuel my company, but not realizing that it's the people, right, that help you generate the revenue, generate the sales, generate the metrics that will help you get that financing and meet the expectations from these VCs. And throughout the past 18 months, I must have met 100 VCs from Silicon Valley all the way to Southeast Asia because of our expansion plan. And knowing that people are the key to helping me close that financing round.
It's just as important with investors too, right? Like you want to get investors that align with your values as well, because they're going to make the right introductions, get you the right people, and give you that leg up to make sure that you're going to be successful.
Right. But at the end of the day, you can have, a lot of people on your deck with a bunch of a lot of people with expertise and credentials, right? But when they start doing due diligence and they start going into your data room, it's all about the metrics. It's all about the data. It's about the sales and revenue. If you don't have that, then they're not going to cut you a check and give you that term sheet that you need. So yes, the credentials and your profile is the first kind of layer of defense. But once they start going to due diligence, it's the data and the metrics that needs to basically be there, and it's the people that help you get that metrics and data, as I always mention.
So very true. All right, let's break this down for our audience, like how we can actively fix this problem. They can plug this into their business, right? So, I mean, look at I'm gonna insert a little of my expertise here. I think taking an active role in interviewing as a co-founder, founder, leader, and getting good at it is, I think, the most crucial thing that you can do. And there's lots of resources out there to get good at it. And if not, find somebody who is really good at it and let them put process in place. Right.
We agree with that. To
Yeah.
help in the gap, right?
Exactly. Well, I think, there's really two key components to this. Is one, understanding the person who's in front of you. I see quite often hires are made a lot of times based on assumptions as opposed to evidence, right? So, so-and-so might have referred this person to us. We like that person. They work out well. And so let's just make the hire. And, you do have a better chance of that being a good hire because it comes through referral, but it's not 100%.
No, it's not. It is
And
not.
maybe it's about 55, 60%, right? And you probably would know your numbers or your data much better than I would. But then, when you seek to understand people and you have fun with it, I think, even if you spend more time getting to understanding the people who are across the desk from you, it puts you in a position where that filters down through the organization, that action filters down through the organization. So then it allows you to poke holes and dig deep and allows other people to do the same thing to make sure that people that you are bringing in are going to align with the values.
Correct. And a lot of times, even though, a friend of mine or an associate referred that person, that they may have referred that person because they get along with the person, right? And they made that recommendation because of that, but they may not fit within my organization. So although I've taken a lot of people through referrals, it was sometimes I failed because of the fact that that referral came from that person that actually worked well and they boded well in the past, but it may not bode well within my organization and the culture that I have built within my company.
Yeah. And I think that's
sometimes referrals may not work and may work at the same time.
I think that's the dangerous assumption. This person comes as a referral, so we should just hire them.
Right.
And you're hitting the nail on the head there. And the key to that is positioning. Really, what is this person positioned to really do? What is it that they desire out of their career? A lot of times we look for passion in people, right? Well, what somebody desires was what their passion is. There's a correlation between those two. So if what they want to do is what your company is, then now you're that much farther ahead of the game. But a lot of times, you get referrals from people because so-and-so is looking for a job, and you just don't want to be in a position where you're a paycheck.
And that's something that you definitely do not want, especially running, in a startup venture. Like for me, in my current venture, I've had to pivot the business once in the past, and if I had employees that were just working for the paycheck, I would have never been able to pivot and be able to kind of continue on this path of PowerBuy. So for sure, as an entrepreneur startup, I highly suggest surrounding yourself with not just people that have great credentials and great experience, but also have that entrepreneurship spirit and grit. So in case that the startup may have to pivot, you have that, the co-founder or your leadership team or your employees, et cetera, that can help you pivot with you, and they can understand that there's risk associated with it.
So that is a really good point. Say that again, which was, I think, without having the right people, you can't pivot.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
startups, I mean, to be honest with you, there's never a home run. There's never an overnight success. And whoever
Nope.
says that is just BSing, right? So for every start, there's got to be pivots. There's got to be changes. There's got to be, and you got to move quick. And
Yep.
you got to have that team in place so that they can basically absorb that kind of, the drawbacks and the cons of the negativity that goes on with startups. And fortunately, I have a great co-founder that can, that can absorb that, can understand that, and it has kind of shared the experience and ride with me at the same time since inception.
See, and that's a great thing to have. When you got a great co-founder, it makes it that much easier. The solo entrepreneurs are the ones that have the tough time.
Correct. But sometimes solo entrepreneurs may be the right path, because if you do not have a co-founder that doesn't have the grit and that doesn't have, the experience to go through that pivot, it might be it might blow back on you from a negative perspective, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's the situation that I see most often, where the biggest mistake is made is they bring on somebody as a co-founder who's not really a co-founder. They're not really
Correct.
positioned to be a co-founder. They're just kind of in between things. And man, that's spot on. All right. So how do we solve this problem? So how do we bring in the right team? How are you doing it?
How am I doing it? Well, for me, I'll keep on going back to referrals. All the people that I have around me have either worked with me in the past in my previous companies, or came through from my advisory. I have a pretty deep advisory board based in the States and as well as in Asia. And they have brought me the people that I have surrounding me to help lead the company.
So that's a really good point. Build a deep advisory board.
Yes, advisory board is very crucial in any startups, because they are there to support you, help you, and also be able to help you pivot the business. Because, although this is my fifth company, I failed a number of times, and I always need people to basically, validate the decisions that I'm making for my company. And one of them is the pivot that I had to do a couple of years ago. And without my advisory board and my board of directors, I would not have been able to pivot and take this new course of action for my company.
That's such a great point. And look, it's not that hard to build a good board of advisors. I mean, you can reach out to people. There are a lot of really good people on the sidelines right now, as we've all heard from the Great Resignation, right?
Correct.
That they're actively passive in, potentially wanting to be an advisor or, join a startup later on down the road. But, there's a lot of really good people there that can help you out in this journey.
Yeah,
I think I learned that from Lori Torres. She was saying, like, if you don't ask a lot of people for help, you
never know. Like for me, I would have never known. Like, one of my board advisors his name is David Mason out of Nashville. Like, I don't know anyone in Nashville, right? The reason why I brought him on as advisory board is one of the VCs that we were in discussions with pre-pivot was based in Nashville. And because of that, I was able to meet David, because he was one of the people that was tasked to do due diligence. And after meeting him, I decided to, develop a pretty good relationship with David, and I brought him on as a board of advisors. And hence, David is on my board and has helped our business even after the pivot.
That's outstanding. All right. So bring in the right team. I mean, that's like really the first step. What would be the next thing that you would recommend?
Bringing the right team and making sure that they all are in line with the vision and mission of the company. If they're not aligned with the vision and mission of the company, and like you said, Rick, if they're just after a paycheck, you don't have the right team.
Yeah, so you need to find that out way before you hire them.
Correct. And once you got the right team and you got the right vision and you got the right mission in place, then all you got to do is step back. And that's what I do. I just literally step back and let my team do the work. And I'm just there basically, being the front of the company and meeting investors. But without my team, it's very difficult for me to do what I do.
Yeah.
And I'm still going through it. I'm not saying, I'm a home run as of yet. We're on the right track, but we're definitely not there yet.
Yeah. It's a journey, right?
It is an absolute journey.
Yeah. All right, shit, Bruce, we're getting pretty close on time. What would be 2 or 3 key takeaways you can give the audience that can plug into their business today?
Before you start a company, make sure that you have a great co-founder. If you are going to have a co-founder in place, and make sure that that co-founder that you're bringing on is able to experience pain, experience pivots, and they're not here to just collect a paycheck and collect money.
Yeah, co-founders usually aren't getting a paycheck though.
And then also, if you do bring on a friend as a co-founder, just be prepared to lose that friend. I don't want to scare any, new entrepreneurs out there, but you have to be prepared to lose a friend if you are going to bring a friend into your venture.
Yep. I can attest to that. I've done that. Yeah. All right, perfect. Well, Bruce, thanks so much for your time investment today. And I want to welcome you to the Higher Power Radio community. Now, what would be the best way in which members of the audience can find you, find your company?
So my company is PowerBuy. So you can go to powerbuy.app to go to our website, and anyone can contact me directly at bruce@powerbuy.app. And that is my email address.
All right. I highly encourage you guys to check that out. Hey, I want to thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Higher Power. Quick thanks to our team, Brian Colburn, Andrea Ballin, and Ayla Gerard. If you're listening to the podcast, please subscribe, review, and share. After all, we're listening to shows for you, so we want to continue to make this show that much better for you in the upcoming year. You can join the Higher Power Radio community at Higher, H-I-R-E, Power, P-O-W-E-R, radio, radio.com, or you can drop me an email at ricketstridesearch.com. Tune in next Tuesday. Our guest is going to be Matt DuBois. He is the co-founder and CEO of ChargeZoom. I'm your host, Rick Gerard, and you have been listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. Aloha. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Higher Power Radio. Catch our LinkedIn Live show every Tuesday at noon, or download the podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform. We appreciate you joining us on Higher Power Radio with your guide to recruitment success, Rick Gerard.